Okay, I am going to get started because I want to make sure we have enough time for the presentations. Again, welcome to the Eastern Transportation Coalition's Virtual Information Exchange, Moving the Needle on CAV Research, Recent TETC Projects for Connected Vehicles. We're going to go through a couple of quick housekeeping items at this point. We are using Zoom webinar, so you're free to use your audio either through your computer or phone, whichever works best for you. And this web meeting is being recorded. If you have any questions, please reach out to Esther and she will help you with either the audio or the video. We really would like your engagement in this event today. So we're going to ask you to ask your questions. You can simply use the Q&A box. And when you click on that, you'll be able to type your question in. We're going to monitor them throughout the event, and those questions will be asked to the presenters at the end of each presentation and at the end of the meeting. If you'd prefer to ask your question verbally, we're just going to ask that you raise your hand. That brings you to the top of the list and lets us know that you have a question. If you do speak during this event, we're going to remind you to keep your line muted while you are not speaking. We will have a couple polling questions and we'll go through them shortly. At this point, I'd like to introduce Lisa Miller. She is the Innovation Program Associate for the Eastern Transportation Coalition. Lisa?
Thank you, Joanna, and welcome everyone. We have a smaller group this time than normal, and that is by design. This is an all public sector audience today. And in the past, we've had a blend of private sector consultants, OEMs, and our public sector audience. So we really encourage you, like Joanna said, very much to get engaged today. There's a great learning opportunity with several wonderful panelists and 2 really meaningful projects that we've been working on for the last couple of months. Next slide, please. For those of you who are familiar with the Eastern Transportation Coalition, we have events pretty much all the time. And we just finished up some freight data planning working groups. Our regional hogs, we've done 3 of the 4 highway operations group meetings. There's 1 more that's going to be in December down in Atlanta. The readiness user group meeting, I think many of you were attending that meeting, was great. And a Traveler Information Summit that just concluded in Raleigh, North Carolina back in October. We have another virtual information exchange or webinar coming up in just a few weeks to talk about our mileage-based user fee work. There was an international truck pilot, which was the first of its kind. And the Coalition's really moving the needle on some of that CAV research. So that's going to be a very interesting one. And a couple of other traveler information focused items coming up. So please check our website for all of the information there. Next slide. Today, we have 19 states registered for this event. Very exciting. We have 55 folks that are registered, probably maybe a few more than that right now from DOTs and MPOs all over the nation. So this is your opportunity to really learn and engage. We hope you do that. Next slide, please. We did the housekeeping, the welcome is almost done, and then we're going to really dive into 2 very interesting projects about pavement marking for automated vehicles and an evaluation study by Connecticut DOT, the Coalition, and UConn, and some work that we did with JD Power to inform and educate drivers on the automated vehicle features that are in their own vehicles. Next slide, please. Here are your speakers for today. Rizk from JD Power, P. Calcaterrav from Connecticut DOT, Shaon Mohammed from the University of Connecticut, and Eric Jackson from the University of Connecticut. And Lisa Boor was part of our project team from JD Power, but she's not joining us today. I'll read their bios really quickly, and then please feel free to ask for more information if you need it in the chat box. Rizk is a Senior Director of User Experience and Benchmarking Technology for JD Power. And Kathy's responsible for managing automotive technology engagements and is the face of the Technology Experience Index study. In this role, Kathy builds on years of being a trusted partner for our clients. She's worked with vehicle manufacturers and suppliers during the product and software development process to identify conceptual misalignments with the voice of customer requirements from a human-machine interface and a user experience perspective. Kathy holds an MBA from Wayne State University and a bachelor's degree in business admin from Central Michigan University. That's a very cool bio, Kathy. That's really interesting. Thanks for being here. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thanks.
Pete Calcaterra is the Senior Transportation Planner for Connecticut DOT. And at Connecticut DOT, Pete has a broad range of responsibilities managing and coordinating critical aspects of various statewide and regional transportation policies, plans, programs, projects, and studies. Over the last several years, Peter has led the efforts in preparations for emerging technologies such as connected and automated vehicles, and currently heads CDOT's CAV program. Peter was the primary author in Connecticut's first ever statewide strategic plan for CAV that was published in February 2021. And Pete also serves as the technology and policy lead for the Connecticut Fast Track CAV bus project. Peter's a graduate of Fordham University in New York City, where he received his bachelor's degree in urban studies. Very cool, Pete. Thanks for being here today. Shaon Mohammed is an associate research scientist with the Connecticut Transportation Institute and University of Connecticut. And before joining UConn, Shaon worked as a senior research specialist in the Department of Civil and Architectural Engineering and Mechanics at the University of Arizona. He's worked as a lead researcher and co-principal investigator on several local, state, and federally funded research projects, focusing on highway safety, crash data analysis, vulnerable road user safety, intelligent transportation systems, and traffic operations. Dr. Shaon's research work examines the fundamental nature of road user behavior, particularly how traffic safety is influenced by driver behaviors, and proposes statistical and economic models to account for driver behavior variables in crash occurrences, which is everything that we do, Shaon. You're right up our alley here. This is amazing. That's what everyone at all of our DOTs are focused on, is traffic safety and driver behavior. So thank you for being here. And Eric Jackson, PhD. Dr. Jackson is the executive director of the Connecticut Transportation Institute at the University of Connecticut. His current research is focused on improving the crash data collection process in Connecticut, as well as providing public access to crash data and transportation safety analysis tools. This includes the Connecticut Crash Data Repository, developing software and systems to analyze transportation safety, and linkage of crash, roadway, and social factor databases to improve transportation safety. Dr. Jackson also led the CTSRC safety analysis team in the development of new software and methods to allow Connecticut to fully implement the highway safety manual methods with the Connecticut Roadway Safety Management System. Thank you for being here, Dr. Jackson, Eric. Next slide, please. As you can see, next slide, please. We have an amazing panel for you today, and a lot of synergy between the two projects and the topics that we're going to be talking about today. So when it comes to moving the needle on CAV research, there are test facilities all over our nation focusing on different things: real-world testing, planning, outreach. And our coalition members will have the opportunity to field visit some of these testing facilities in 2024 through our Connected Automated Vehicle Working Group. Our member agencies are really on a quest for better understanding and use of connected vehicle technology. The currently available connected vehicles technologies, as we just talked about only in the bios, have the ability to make roads safer and provide better mobility. And our recently completed projects that we're going to be talking about today really move that needle on the research. Next slide, please. Okay, your first opportunity to weigh in. Please submit your answer in the question and answer box. We're going to read some of them off right now. What are you learning through CAV readiness work in your state? And we specifically left this question a little bit open-ended. We're very interested to hear, what kind of readiness studies are you doing? Are you working with any private sector companies? Have OEMs come to talk to you? What are you learning in your state as far as deployment of these connected vehicle or automated vehicle technologies? We'll give everybody a minute to dive in here. I'm seeing some familiar faces. I'll call on people. While you guys are getting warmed up here, I'll mention some of my previous life work out in Utah. My colleague Blaine Leonard was working on an AV readiness study very similar to the one that UConn and Connecticut DOT just worked on, essentially to see, you know, how ready are the roads? Are vehicles of today, vehicles that are deployed today, going to be out there and really use their technologies and their features on rural intersections for crash avoidance, things like that. When the roads are dry and everything is great in the middle of the summer, you know, that's when a lot of crashes happen. But what about in inclement weather? So they did a lot of work out there. Okay, Amanda, thank you. The technology is not ready as not as ready as the vendor may say it is. Very interesting. And Amanda, another comment, law enforcement is very interested in understanding these vehicles and how they may interact with law enforcement. That's a very good point. And right before I left Utah DOT, we actually did a roundtable workshop with all of the law enforcement. And there were different breakout groups, and all of the law enforcement went over to that enforcement and operations one. You know, who do we give the ticket to, and what kind of laws need to be changed, that sort of thing. And we have another comment from Chet in Massachusetts. We are starting to think about upsizing your ITS cabinets. Great, to make room for future devices, as well as for sharing out ITS locations that have powerful connectivity for side of the road CAV devices. That's great. And some of the folks that are on our virtual information exchange today, I know some agencies, Chet, are actually moving towards not putting things in cabinets and not having the physical infrastructure. They're moving towards things that are more cloud-based in nature. But it's kind of been a historic challenge for us our entire career to make sense of these ITS technologies and what's going to be working now and what we need to invest in now and what might not be relevant in the future. So thank you guys for weighing in, and please feel free to weigh in as we go along today. Next slide, please. The crux of the question, why should we get ready? A lot of AV readiness studies are out there. We talked about a few of those already. A lot of opportunities to collaborate and learn from these early pilots and deployments. And as a corridor coalition, there's really a lot of learning opportunities and lessons when one state leads and another state may come after. Think about the benefit of moving goods and services, having safer roads, more efficient networks across an entire transportation system. It's achievable through this technology, and we're already doing it in a lot of ways, but this is a dramatic enhancement. Next slide, please. So why should we get ready? And then how does safety fit into the mix? Of course, this graphic is from New Jersey DOT and some of the work that they did back in 2022 on how collaborating can advance connected vehicle technology. Advancements in these automotive technologies have really prompted states like New Jersey to really look at the potential of connected vehicle systems and really explore that. Connected vehicle technology, of course, allows cars on the road to communicate with everything around it, V2X, V2V, V2I, and react accordingly. So that speed safety warnings and the curb speed warnings that I mentioned just a minute ago, there's a dramatic ability to increase safety there. Next slide, please. When it comes to messaging CAV, of course, the shuttle on the left is an automated shuttle, but the public really lumps all of this together in one big technology bucket. And we know that connected vehicles make roads safer. We know that technology has a great capability. But when it comes to implementing these, the traveling public is still seeing these as something that's very much futuristic and very much spot deployment, and not something that is obtainable maybe in our career, maybe in our lifetime, but we know differently. And that's one of the things that we've worked on with the JD Power Project is making sure that the traveling public is really very aware and understanding of the capabilities that exist today for traffic safety. Next slide, please. Okay, poll number 2, and then we're going to get into the meat of our discussion today. Active driving assistance will operate reliably under the following conditions, and you all are going to get to be test subjects for us. This is exactly the kind of question that we asked the focus group participants for the JD Power Project. So please weigh in. Active driving assistance will operate reliably under the following conditions. You can select all that apply. At night, sharp curves, when there's snow. Okay, we'll leave it open for just a few more seconds here.
We're getting a few more responses in.
Okay, Joanna and Esther and Justin, let's go ahead and close the poll and see how everyone voted. Great, okay, interesting, none of the above. When lane paint markings are faded was not popular at night. Sharp curves when there's snow. Okay, great. We will get into that. Thank you for sharing your feedback there. And before I hand it over to Kathy and JD Power, I'd like to welcome Cheryl Bradley, our new TISMO program director. And Cheryl, I think, has been here for about a month, and she's been very busy, really digging in and engaging, and we're very happy to have her. So please introduce yourself, and please feel free to reach out to Cheryl if you have any TISMO related questions or recommendations. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, Cheryl, did you want to say something? Sorry about that.
Thank you. I appreciate the introduction. I look forward to working with everyone.
Great. Okay, thank you everyone for being here. Kathy, the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Thank you. You just get it in presentation mode here. Can everyone see it okay?
Yeah, looks great.
Okay. Well, thanks for taking the poll, and I think it shows a little bit of the data we're finding with consumers too, is that a lot of people don't know what limitations there really are on active driving assistance features. So it didn't work under any of those conditions, right? It doesn't work reliably, I should say, under any of those conditions. So it's a good setup for the introduction to this project we did. So I started talking to Lisa about, I don't know, Lisa, now a year and a half, 2 years ago. And we were talking about the fact, and if you were on the presentation last fall, I presented some slides showing that from our data, customers just don't really know how to use some of these ADAS technologies. So at JD Power, we track technology as one of our annual studies. So I have almost 100,000 US drivers of new vehicles. They own them for 90 days. And I look at new technologies on their car, including ADAS technologies, and you can really see how customers are struggling with some of them. I mean, some of them are a little bit easier than others, but in particular, there are a few that are very difficult. And we know that if they're not using them properly, and they don't use them frequently, assuming they're using them properly, then that can really impact road safety. So we talked about this pilot project to look at what could we do to help educate customers. And when we do educate them on a technology, how does it elevate what they know? So what we looked at as our primary objective was, could we move that needle if they were given proper training? Now, in our time frame we had to do this survey, we couldn't do a full-blown training, but what we wanted to look at is, what metrics did we really need to train on? And if we did, focus on those metrics and really try and explain it a little bit more than what they're getting from the dealer and what they're getting from the vehicle manufacturer, does that really move the needle? So that was our primary objective. So as we went into this study, we wanted to know their baseline. So we started out asking them was this technology easy to use? From their perspective, did they think they were having any difficulty using that technology? And then we created a variety of metrics. We had almost 40 metrics that we looked at. And then we got their baseline to understand, did they really know what they thought they knew, right? We put together a 7-minute video that trained them on various aspects of the technology, such as limitations, feature reactions, understanding the images in the cluster. A lot of people have a very, very difficult time with that. And then what we did is repeated those same questions after the video to see how much learning occurred in that 7-minute window. And again, the goal wasn't to have them fully trained. It was to understand the impact we could have if a proper training was involved on some of these more complex ADAS technologies. And then lastly, we looked at, how do they want to learn if learning is required? So just quickly on the methodology to give you a little background on what we did. So as I mentioned at JD Power, we check a variety of ADAS technologies from that user experience every year. So we worked with the great team that Lisa put together from the coalition and the partners, and we brought them through some options in terms of which technology we should look at. So we wanted to pick one brand and one technology. So because the video had to be very specific to a particular brand, we couldn't do a variety of brands in this pilot study. So the first thing we did is went through JD Power's databases to look at, among the ADAS technologies we track, what one was the most impactful in terms of having issues from a user experience perspective. So in our data, we look at active versus passive. So a passive technology is classified as something like automatic emergency braking. That's where the driver doesn't really have to do anything, right? As long as it's on, it should, activate when needed. So we wanted a technology that was not passive. We wanted something that the customer had to be actively involved. We also wanted to make sure that it was on, several vehicles, not that it was a brand new technology that only a handful of models had. And then we wanted to look at across our quality metrics. So if you're not familiar with JD Power is the industry standard in the automotive industry for quality, and we measure things on problems per 100 vehicles. So as I mentioned, we survey roughly 100,000 participants a year to understand when they buy a new vehicle after 90 days that experience. And they'll report problems across a variety of attributes. So we have roughly 225 attributes in the study. And we look at the problems, or we say PP100. That's a metric where we look at the number of people who reported that particular problem, and we divide it by the number of returns for that vehicle, and then we multiply it by 100. So this is really the industry benchmark for quality. So we ended up picking active driving assistance. It's a complex technology that's taking your adaptive cruise control along with your lane centering technology in order to have that active driving assistance feature, and requiring those two technologies to work together is why we thought this was really a good one, because some manufacturers have it combined for the owner, and others you have to operate both systems. Then on the brand side, we wanted a mass market brand so that it applied to more people. We wanted to make sure it was across a lot of models in that brand. And then we looked at, problems to make sure it was a technology that was problematic for the brand. So we ended up going with Toyota because Toyota's active driving assistance feature is pretty complicated for their owners. So that's how we ended up with picking active driving assistance along with Toyota. And just quickly, to give you a little more background on the video, what we did is we took all of our voice of customer data and we went through all the verbatims and all the responses to understand where do customers struggle, because we know OEMs have videos out there, but they're typically short videos and they don't cover all of the details. So we went in and found that people were struggling with understanding feature reaction. So they don't know what the vehicle is really going to do under certain conditions. We looked at limitations. We looked at the cluster in terms of icons and images. We looked at requirements to operate this technology, like speed and what type of roads, and then how to even engage the technology. Do they know when it's in a ready state versus an active state? So these are all the things that we put into this 7-minute video. And you can see a link down here if you ever want to watch it to see what the video comprised. Are there any questions on the methodology? Okay, so I'm going to take you through the key findings. So we had 13, we had a baker's dozen here, 13 key findings for this study. And the first one is really a general finding from our knowledge at J.D. Power, from all the data we collect, that, you know, while we focused on Toyota for active driving assistance, Toyota is not the only brand with this problem. This is a universal problem across the industry. So I wanted to just share a little bit of data with you to show you why. So yes, we focused on that, but this is a problem for everybody. In that first chart there, in terms of overall satisfaction on a 10-point scale, you can see there that customers in the TETC study didn't find this technology to be very satisfying, right? At 7.63, they had a lot of problems with it, right? They didn't trust the technology. That was the #1 problem they had. And those findings correlate with our TXI, our Tech Experience Index study, where we have 90,000 participants, almost 100,000 participants. We have that same score there of 7.88. So very similar findings to the TETC study, where we have, you know, that same type of satisfaction score, which we would associate with not being satisfied on a 10-point scale. When we look at those problems, like I mentioned earlier, we break them down into categories. So the biggest problem with ADAS technologies is customers consider them to be very annoying and distracting, right? They feel like they're getting a lot of alerts and they just start to tune them out. And they also think it works inconsistently because they don't understand those limitations. So this was pretty problematic at 12.7. Toyota's system happens to be 18 problems per 100. And just to tell you, because everyone thinks, oh, Tesla's a great, great at putting out technology. Tesla has 27 problems per 100. So, you know, quite a bit more than the average for their autopilot system. So just to show you again, it's not just about Toyota. This is an industry-wide problem of people using a technology that they really don't understand. Our second key finding was just about the fact that this lack of standardization in the industry is also really affecting consumer understanding. So, you know, we don't have any kind of standardized naming conventions, and J.D. Power is working with SAE and Consumer Reports and other industry organizations to try and get vehicle manufacturers to use common naming conventions. And when we look at, you know, Toyota, for example, for the technology required to use active driving assistance, you know, we take something like adaptive cruise control, and they call it full speed range dynamic radar cruise control, which is really a lot to say, right? Customers can't remember that name, and they have various versions of it. So if you don't have stop and go, you just have dynamic radar cruise control. You know, then for the lane centering, it's called lane tracing assist, and it actually is comprised of 3 types of lane support. So you've got your lane departure, your lane keeping assist, and your lane centering. And then customers don't understand from the images being provided which level of support they're getting, because they don't even know there are 3 levels, right? And on top of it, we call it lane tracing, which to a lot of people feels like it's following the edge of the lane, right? It's tracing the lane marking. So again, these are not really user-friendly namings that Toyota is applying to their ADAS technology, and in particular to active driving assistance. And then on top of it, they package it in a marketing term called safety sense. Safety sense doesn't appear anywhere in the vehicle. So again, they're not the only ones doing this. We see this vehicle manufacturer after vehicle manufacturer, and we just have a few of them there on the screen you can see. But this really adds to a high level of confusion in terms of, you know, what capability do I have? What features are required for me to use this technology? Okay, so moving away now from the kind of overall industry picture, I just wanted to set the stage that this is not just a Toyota problem. Our third key finding was there's really a lack of critical knowledge regarding active driving assistance. So as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, when you have people who are using this technology and they don't really know how to use it, it creates a situation where you have unsafe drivers on the road. And just to give you a couple of examples here, when we asked customers, which technologies do you even need to use active driving assistance? 40% of them, you can see 60% got it right, but you have 40% of people with this capability, which is offered on a lot of Toyota vehicles, that don't even know which technologies comprise active driving assistance. And a little bit more concerning is the fact that we asked, what type of roads does this feature actually work? And when you look at that, we have 1/3 of the owners with this capability knowing this. So, you have all of these people out there thinking that this capability works on roads with traffic lights, which it doesn't. And, it can't see a traffic light, so it's not going to stop your vehicle. And if it comes upon a vehicle that's already stopped at a light, it cannot pick it up. So it's going to keep barreling into them until AEB is applied because of a rear end collision potential. So people are using this capability incorrectly on roads with traffic lights. And, you have 1/3 of people understanding that capability. I don't have this on here too, but we asked, what speed does this technology actually work? It has to be at least 32 miles per hour. Most people did not get that answer right. They thought it could work at almost any speed. So again, they're not understanding when they're actually getting that support through this technology. Our fourth key finding is, showing the fact that consumer knowledge of this technology is almost non-existent. So as I mentioned, we had roughly 40 attributes. You can see them here in the white column. They were categorized by some of those things that I showed you in the video, right? So we looked at settings, limitations, we looked at the images in the cluster. We looked at equipment required, those are the features. We looked at speed requirements. And you can see here that basically everybody got a failing grade here. We created this scale and it's a bit subjective. We went from color code just to kind of show you at a glance, how are people doing? And we were a little bit, we gave one attribute a green score, and that's for active driving for the adaptive cruise control in terms of the preset distance. People seem to know that the most. We had 79% of people getting that part right. But when you start to look down here at limitations where it doesn't work reliably on sharp curves, in snow, when there's issues with the lane markings, you're getting here at a very, very small percent of people who know that, right? So, the most of the answers here are in this dark red, which are really, really poor scores. So we have all of these people on the road who think a technology is easy to use. We had 94% of people saying that they thought this technology was easy to use. So 94%. And then look at the scores over here. So they are completely under a misconception that they know how to operate this technology, and they absolutely do not. It's a little bit frightening to see how poorly they scored on some of these metrics. The fifth key finding was that they knew a little bit more about the adaptive cruise control portion of this capability than they do with the lane centering aspect of it. But adaptive cruise control has been around a lot longer. And even so, there was definitely still a lot of deficiencies in terms of their knowledge. These were some of the questions that we asked, which were on the prior slide here. And you can see, as I mentioned, 79% knew that it would follow a vehicle by a preset distance. But when you look over here at the tail end of this here, how do you resume adaptive cruise control when you're using it and the vehicle's been brought to a complete stop? Most people don't know, right? We have, a few people that knew that you could push the resume button, you can depress the accelerator pedal, or if it's under 3 seconds, it would start on its own. So, really there still is quite a deficit in terms of what people really know about this technology, even though it's been around much longer than some of the lane centering technologies. They're more prevalent in terms of the vehicles it's offered on. And then when we compare that to the lane centering technology, you can see that the bar drops significantly. We're not even starting anywhere near the 79%, right? We just go, we start at 49 with people understanding one image where it was exiting the lane on the right. But from there, we just really decline rapidly in terms of any type of understanding. So as I mentioned, they don't really understand these limitations in terms of when it cannot operate. And they don't understand the feature reaction in terms of what is that vehicle going to do. So for instance, if you, don't remember to turn on your blinker and you're trying to change lanes, the vehicle is going to fight you to stay in the lane. And they don't recognize a lot of this type of reaction to how the vehicle will behave under different circumstances. Again, creating this situation where we have a lot of drivers on the road, not thinking this technology is easy to use when they really don't know much about it. And when we look at this, now we have our two pieces of this technology and we pull it together for active driving assistance and we add more layers, right? So what is it going to do if you took your hands off the wheel? And what if you continue to ignore that warning? We add that whole third layer. And when you get to those attributes and we look at that, we dropped down to single digits on some of them in terms of what customers understood, how many got it right. So this is a really complex technology for customers and they are not using it properly on the roads. We looked at, after the video, how well did the video do in moving that needle? And what we found is 71% of participants in this pilot study improved their level of knowledge just from a 7-minute video. Again, this wasn't meant to be an all-encompassing training. It was really to look at different aspects of where we know customers struggle and can we start to move the needle on what their knowledge base is. Interestingly, older people learned the most. So besides that, we didn't see a big difference in demographics in terms of what they learned. But older people seem to retain the most from that training video. When we tested them afterwards, they had the most movement in terms of their improvement in their scores. So now I want to show you the post video to show you how we move that needle, right? So this first column here, these same roughly 40 metrics, but this is our pre-training, how they scored. Now we're looking at the post-training and they're sorted by the post-training here. But you can see here things like, where we had 79% of understanding that they follow by a preset distance, it went up to 93. So we really moved the needle on some of these. Almost on everyone, the two that we went backwards on a little bit were on beeps. They don't quite understand why things are beeping in the car, even after the video. But some of them, we had some really significant growth in terms of learning here, like the limitations. So if you look over here, see how many of the limitations, moved up in terms of their score, because this is now in rank order in terms of, how many people got this correct. And you can see here the colors have changed quite a bit, right? We've lost a lot of that dark red. We've, moved a lot more to lighter shades here, meaning that we did move the needle across a lot of these. But feature reaction, when you look over here, still a lot at the bottom, right? And you see no lane markings, they don't seem to understand what happens when there are no lane markings. So we had like, when you're going by an exit ramp and the lane markings are no longer present, when the lane markings are fading, et cetera, they just don't seem to understand what the feature reaction will be when that occurs. And on top of that, you can see here a lot of the cluster images, the things we tested around the cluster images. Again, we have improvement, but they still are struggling. So these are two areas that in any type of formal training really needs to have a lot more attention to more time spent on this, because this is where customers are still really struggling. But the good news is, right, is if you do provide some proper training, we do see that customers can start to learn a lot more about this technology and be able to use it more properly, right? And hopefully that will make the roads safer, especially if they had a formal training. Our 8th key finding is taking a little bit deeper dive into these cluster images, because I think this, again, is a big deal for the industry. everybody does something different. And so if you have multiple vehicles in your household, if you're replacing a vehicle every 2 to 3 years because you're leasing it and you get different brands, you're starting at square one again with this technology, because we have no consistency in the automotive industry in terms of not only naming conventions, but the images that we're conveying. So whether it's icons, warning messages, customers don't understand it. So in this question, it was one of the easier ones of the images. We showed these 4 images and we said, which is the right one that shows that you have active driving assistance and it's active? And you can see over here, this is the before and after the video. So you can say, yes, 61% got it right. But roughly 40% of people didn't have any idea, they're driving using this technology and they don't even know when it's actually active. So it did improve after the video. We went to 81%, but still, you can see here that we have these people using this technology on the roads without even having some of that fundamental knowledge of what does this status image mean. And especially, if they don't have the driving assistance screen up in the cluster, they may have just this status bar only, and perhaps this is a digital display of their speed. They then have to really rely on just the icons here and whether they're changing colors or flashing to know really if this capability is working. So there's so much for them to learn, and they cannot learn it all at dealer delivery. Just another example of this, we went down to kind of the next level, not just is it working, but we showed a situation where, the screen changed because something happened, right? In this case, we lost the lane markings on the right side of the vehicle. And so we asked them, which of these statements were correct, and we have them sorted here by correct and incorrect. And this was really telling, because when you look at, the blue was pre-video, the green is post-video. And when you look at, we didn't see much improvement despite them being trained on this, right? And in fact, if you look at the things that were incorrect, we had 54% of people saying that active driving assistance is operating here because at least one blue lane marking is showing. And that's not correct. They have to have it on both sides in order for the active driving assistance to be working. So this area of the images in the cluster really needs to be addressed as an industry. To really help customers understand this. They can't look down and stare at this cluster screen, right? They're looking down at a glance. And if they happen to be looking when this is going off, right? Not everybody has a heads up display where this is being shown. So customers are still really, really struggling with these images. And there's a lot of work still to be done in terms of educating customers on the images. There's more examples of this in the report. And by the way, there's more slides to these findings. They're in the deck, they're just hidden for time purposes. Number 9, I wanted to show you is that we did make a lot of headway in terms of limitations, as I mentioned, but there's still a lot to do to reduce risky situations on the road, because customers really need to understand the features reaction to different situations. But on the limitations, we really saw a lot of growth in terms of knowledge, both pre and post video. So again, pre is the blue here, and you can see the amount of people who started to understand those limitations after even just that short amount of training. And this is huge. It's really important that they know, right? Like that it can't detect pedestrians, right? It's not going to work reliably when those lane markings are faded. It's not going to work reliably on sharp curves. They're always at night. So we made a lot of headway, even in that short video, in terms of limitations. But as I mentioned, feature reactions, when we gave them all these what if situations in terms of, if the lane markings are gone, if you're getting warning messages from the active driving assistance to put your hands on the wheel, they don't know what that vehicle is going to do. They're still having a hard time with that. But our 10th key finding was that overall, almost 100% of people found the training helpful. You can see if we put somewhat and very helpful together there. And you can see some of the verbatim comments there, like they couldn't figure out some of the things earlier. Now they had a better understanding. They never paid attention that much to the feature before. They didn't understand what some of the icons meant. And this is all well and good, but the problem is is when you have 94% of people thinking a technology is easy to use, yet I showed you they knew absolutely nothing about this technology in terms of how it works. It's how do you get them to actually take the time to be trained? And that's one of the biggest issues, right? Because they only know what they know, right? So they think that knowledge is there, and it really wasn't. Our 11th key finding was that content and depth play a really critical role. When we look at OEM videos online, we look at what the dealer can do. And I, talked about this a little bit last year in the presentation, but dealers have a 30-minute sweet spot at vehicle delivery. So, they cannot teach all of these technologies. When someone picks up a car, they're trying to introduce them to service because that's where they make their money. They have to set up the vehicle. They have to set up the vehicle app because that now controls a lot in the vehicle. They have to set up the user's phone in the car, et cetera, et cetera. So they don't have time to spend and go into depth about this capability. And honestly, a lot of dealers aren't trained well enough, right? They're dealing with a lot of different models, a lot of different technologies. It's changing every year. Their sales staff changes frequently. They don't carry the right knowledge in order to teach customers in terms of what are those feature reactions, what are those limitations. And when we look at people like in my study, it's at 90 days, but this one here is from 2020 to 2023 model year vehicles. And when we look at that, you can see here, if they learn from the dealer, they learn from outside learning, that can be videos, it could be the owner's manual. They learned on their own. There was really no difference. Even prior experience didn't play much of a role in terms of how much they really knew about active driving assistance. So that tells you that through all these methods that we're using today, they're failing. They are not successful in this technology in terms of getting customers to understand this technology. Number 12 is there's an opportunity here. When we ask people, how would you like to learn? Most of them would like to learn in person or self-administered videos. So there is an opportunity here. But as I said, the real struggle is how do you get them to do it when they don't realize they're lacking that knowledge? I mean, at this point in the survey, they realized they were lacking the knowledge, right? Because we showed them that video and they didn't know a lot of those things. But it is still quite a struggle, but there is no one right method. I mean, one method of saying they can only train them this way will not work. You're going to have to look at different ways to educate customers. And it's not every ADAS technology, right? It's just certain ones are more difficult than others. And this one is really important because if you have people thinking like autopilot is a technology that they can use without, paying attention, we have people sleeping in the back of their car on the roads. It's really scary. And because of that, we're saying here that mandatory educational training may be necessary on some of these various ADAS technologies, such as active driving assistance, so that customers really understand how to use that capability. And we did have people open to, especially younger people, learning from the Secretary of State. The insurance provider was a little, less appealing than some of the other methods. Vehicle manufacturer and the dealer were the most important, but as I just showed you, they're not, moving the needle. They are not doing what they're doing today is not effective on some of these ADAS technologies. So those were the key findings. We just lastly had a couple recommendations that really, and I know some of these might be hard to do, but we just wanted to talk through them a little bit. Like collaborative training is really important, right? It has to have more content in terms of looking at things like understanding the images, those feature reactions, those limitations. And I think as an industry, we have to all work together better than we do today. It can't all be on the OEM or on the dealer. I also think that, and again, this is not something that necessarily the coalition can fix here, but, I think putting more pressure to have increased training on dealer staff. As I said, some of these technologies are pretty complex and they're really the, main contact for that customer, and that customer looks to the dealer to provide a lot of this information. So, they should have a stronger knowledge than they do today. Most of the salespeople couldn't tell you all those limitations. They couldn't tell you those feature reactions. So, as an industry, again, we need to change the way we look at that. Number 3 was, increase the variety of training methods, right? As I mentioned, customers want in-person or self-administered training videos, but a 3-minute video from a vehicle manufacturer is not going to cover it. Even our 7-minute isn't enough, right? I mean, our goal was, as I said, wasn't to have someone walk away completely trained. What we wanted to see is if we got them to focus on that, could we move the needle, and how much did they actually know? And what we found is they didn't know anything. I mean, lastly, I don't know if this is possible. I know this is a difficult thing to do, but perhaps, to improve road safety and make sure we have proper use and frequent use of technologies is to perhaps mandate some type of education for particular ADAS technologies, such as active driving assistance. That's pretty complex for people. As I mentioned, most people who took the video training said that they were going to start to use it more, and that they plan to have this type of technology on their next vehicle. So again, we can't have them, as I showed you, prior experience didn't make a difference because they didn't know how to properly really use it on this one. So that was my findings. So is there any questions?
That was great, Kathy. Thank you so much. And this was a fascinating project. It's obviously very fact-based and very data-driven. And JD Power really brought a wealth of knowledge to the table. So thank you. We do have a question from Mina. And I'm a little afraid to ask this too, Mina, but Kathy, how do you and how does JD Power define older? Tell us about that a little bit, please.
Oh, we typically use generations. So we'll have our older, in this case, we were looking at baby boomers and pre-boomers. So people, I can't remember the quite grouping there, but it would be people around 50 and up. So. Okay,
great. And then you did mention a little bit more collaboration and consistency there. I know that JD Power, AAA, the Society of Automotive Engineers, the National Safety Council worked on the Clearing the Confusion document a couple of years ago. And I was just talking to 2 of my colleagues yesterday who were traveling in a rental car that had a lot of bells and whistles on it. And they said, this is weird. We need to take 10 minutes and really figure out how this car works before we even put the car in drive. So it's a crux of the problem. And then we do have a question from Pete as well. Are you planning on bringing the findings of this project to groups like the Automotive Innovators Association that represent the OEMs? There's a lot of other various national groups. I guess we didn't talk about that a whole lot. What are you planning on doing with this data now that we have it?
We're open to working with you on it. I mean, that's, you guys, this is a proprietary study, so it's up to, the coalition, what you'd like to do with it, but we're happy to support you if you want to take it to different groups.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be a great idea. It's really important, and your research really showed how much influence the OEMs have over the landscape, the safety aspect, and specifically why it's so important for this group here today. Okay, we have a hand raised, I believe. Whose hand is raised?
That's Chet.
Oh, Chet. Chet, please go ahead.
Do I have audio now?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. Hey, that was fantastic. I think something that I spent a lot of time thinking about is when we're going to have a really, close to 50-50 mixed fleet of connected vehicles and non-connected vehicles. And that's often where there's a challenge. I'll kind of give the antidote. When I bring my pickup truck to the Toyota dealership, they have to find one of the 2 people that knows how to drive a stick shift still. But if I brought my 1980s Tacoma in, they have to find the one guy left who knows how to work on a carburetor. So, my children are never going to drive a car with non-anti-lock brakes. I grew up driving on non-anti-lock brakes, so I can control a skid better. So we're going to have a generation of drivers that are going to have to mix and match between those 2 and know those different safety margins and performance characteristics between those as our infrastructure and our driving techniques adapt. And we're going to have to train users for both levels of vehicles. I think that's just going to be a really interesting and challenging time as well.
No, that's absolutely a good point. That's the problem is, not every vehicle has this, right? So you can get in one and think you have this capability and you might not, right? And you're going to have expectations that it's going to do certain things and it won't. So it's absolutely a good point to say that we're going to have problems for years to come with different generations.
And that's a great point. I think headway and stopping distance will be kind of those great examples, right? A teenager that, was driving their parents' $50,000 BMW has a tighter headway because of it's talking to the other vehicle and stopping distance is increased. When they buy their first 20-year-old Honda Civic, it doesn't have that. We're going to have some issues.
Yeah, thank you,
sure.
Chet. Great insight. One more question for you, and then I forgot to mention, we do have the training video on the Coalition's YouTube page, so feel free to go over there and take a peek at what the survey, the focus group respondents were looking at. Mina has another question. Are there car companies that do a good job of creating ADAS that's understandable, and should that information be shared with consumers like the safety factors are? Great question, Mina.
Honestly, there's some that are better than others. Like I would say Cadillac Super Cruise for this in particular technology, right? So, but it's better, but it's also, I know we don't classify it, or SAE does not classify it as like a 2+, but technically it is a stronger capability than, a Toyota system where you have to turn on different features, right? It's geo-mapped to the freeway. So it works very differently. So, we do see as they're moving up a bit in terms of this capability differences, but, in general, they're producing a lot of different technologies, right? And I mean, we took a deep dive into this one, but I wouldn't say anyone does all of them well, right? There's always, our data shows a lot of room for improvement, especially, customers don't understand warning messages across most of them. And this lack of consistency in terms of naming conventions. I think last year I showed you, from Consumer Reports, right? They put out a study that showed, I think we had 40 different naming conventions for just AEB alone, right? So customers don't understand what they have, and OEMs are trying. They we work with them trying to help get more voice of customer into that design, but it's a real challenge for them.
Well, great. Thank you again, Kathy. And feel free to type more questions into the question and answer for Kathy. We can answer those offline, but we'll shift to our second presenter group for today. Eric and Shaon and Pete, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Shaon, could you please share your screen? Because I think my slides are on the first view of your presentation.
Yep, I'm sharing it. Let me know if you can see it.
Thank you. And as Shaon's doing that, Kathy, again, I just echo, that was a great presentation. Absolutely much needed information to get out to as many people as possible. I can personally attest, I definitely do enjoy the adaptive cruise control in my car, and didn't know until I almost like slammed into the car in front of me that the adaptive cruise control does not actually detect stop vehicles ahead of me. So that's something that I think is very important for folks to know when they get behind the wheel, that when you're moving, that's great, but when if a vehicle in front of you is stopped, you should be ready to take over and not trust the AEB will save your life. So that's definitely and I'm actively involved in this space, right? So it's something I sort of stumbled upon. So a lot of opportunities for the dealerships, I think, and the OEMs to provide some training. Shaon, could you back up a couple slides here? This skipped ahead here. Yep, backwards. Yep, one back, please. The title slide. There you go. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to talk very quickly because I'm going to let Shaon dive into the details of our project. Thank you, everyone, for having us. We have multiple organizations that are collaborating on this project, where we looked at advanced driver assistance systems and the interrelationship of ADAS with pavement markings, and ultimately, what matters for the purposes of pavement marking in relationship to ADAS. Shaon, next slide, please. Just to give some context as to where this project came about. Back in the previous slide, Shaon. Yeah, there you go. The MUTCD, so Federal Highway, every, I don't know, probably dozen years or so comes out with new requirements for roadway elements, and a couple years ago came out with a proposed draft update to the MUTCD, Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which proposed making requirements to how longitudinal lines are put down on the road, including making them wider, extending dotted or dashed lines at on-ramps and off-ramps, and also making updates to retroreflectivity. So that sort of piqued our interest, and knowing that we had a variety of, we're a member of the coalition. We also had Consumer Reports. Their auto test center is in Connecticut. Started to put the pieces together, saying this is an opportunity possibly could do a research project to dive into these specific issues to find out, does lane marking width matter in terms of the performance of ADAS? Does the dotted line extensions matter on ramps and off ramps, extending them all the way through those areas? Does retroreflectivity matters, and what level of retroreflectivity, as examples? Next slide, please. Again, as mentioned, Consumer Reports is in our backyard here in Connecticut, and we know that all new cars today, an increasing number of new cars, I should say, and an increasing percentage of overall cars on the roadway each and every year have various forms of advanced driver assistance systems on it. But namely, all of them to some degree do look at the lane markings. Again, this is we're matching up the MUTCD coming out and the fact that new cars on the road have this, so it really is a captive audience for us to be able to marry those two. Next slide, please. And this is a bolded list of some of the things that we had really formulated as questions in the back of our mind, the types of things that we wanted to evaluate. We didn't necessarily evaluate every single one of these in this research project. Shaon will go through the things that we were able to evaluate in a real world environment. There are some challenges, obviously, to be able to accurately and qualitatively assess every single one. But these are the types of issues that we were grappling with and trying to figure out what impact they may have on the performance of ADAS in real world environment. And I think we only have one more slide, and then I'll turn it over to Shaon. Yep, this is a closing slide here that, again, we have Consumer Reports in our backyard. We're members of the coalition. We have federal highway research dollars at Connecticut DOT. So we were able to, and UConn here does a lot of work with Connecticut DOT. This project is actually technically two parallel projects where we were able to stitch together a partnership between all the entities here. And it really is a fascinating effort. And I really want to turn it over to Shaon where he can dive into all these details here, but excited to be here and happy to answer any questions at the end if necessary. Shaon?
Thank you, Pete. Yep. So I'll take over. Oh, I think. Yep. So I'll go ahead and present some of the details that Pete mentioned regarding our study. So as Pete already discussed, is we already know that manufacturers has begun incorporating these new ADS features, which can trace lane or track lane and assist driver in keeping the vehicle within the lane. And the longitudinal pavement marking is the only primary roadway asset that ADAS sensors actually look for reference on the roadway. So the question that we started with is, can we rely on the existing roadway markings to guide the new cars of today, as well as the cars from the future? Or what would be the minimal longitudinal pavement marking requirements for the ADAS technologies to be successfully working on the roadway to improve safety? So the objective of the study were evaluate the effect of pavement marking characteristics such as color, retroreflectivity, lane marking width on the machine vision detection. And we also wanted to explore the effect of different lighting conditions, like detecting in daytime or nighttime has an effect on those machine vision detection or not. Another thing that we wanted to evaluate is whether there is any difference across vehicles from multiple manufacturers. So if we use a sedan compared to a truck or an SUV, and from Toyota or Ford or Hyundai, so different companies, cars from different companies, because they use their own proprietary system, whether there is any difference across different makes and models or not. So we did collected the data on real world roadway around District 2 in Connecticut. So as Pete already mentioned, so we actually created 7 tasks for this project, and this project was done between the collaboration from multiple agencies. We worked with Connecticut DOT, Consumer Report worked under funding from TETC to collect the real world data. So to give you a little bit overview, we collected the roadway, UConn collected the roadway pavement marking data using a mobile retroreflectometer, and Consumer Report collected the data from ADAS, vehicle equipped with ADAS sensors on the real world, and then we integrated all the data to analyze and analyze the data. Okay, moving on. So the study design was quite simple for our study. So we wanted to evaluate whether there was any changes in machine vision detection on the lane marking or not. So we did identify sites where Connecticut was scheduled to pave and paint the roadway so that we can collect before, during, and after the painting to see whether there was any changes in machine vision detection or not. We also collected the data in daytime and nighttime on the same roadway to understand whether there was a change, there's any effect of this lighting condition or not. So we selected 2 types of different types of pavement marking, VIP, epoxy, to understand, and the temporary painting, so that we can understand whether 4-inch to 6-inch marking has an effect or not. So for retroreflectivity data, so let's talk about the data collection from Consumer Report. So Consumer Report initially reached out to each, they selected 8 vehicles to collect the data equipped with ADAS sensors. So they initially reached out to each vehicle manufacturer, but vehicle manufacturer actually restricted them to tap into their system. So we couldn't tap into the system to see when the machine vision was able to detect the lane marking or not. So the only thing we could do is we can assemble cameras on the dashboard to see whether the lane marking is detected or not. So we actually used a Consumer Report used 4 camera setup, 1 showing the driver point of view, 1 on the dashboard, and 2 on the side to collect the data. And later on, we processed those video data and identified where the machine vision was able to detect the lane marking and where it failed to detect the lane marking. For the retroreflectivity data, we purchased a LaserLux G7 mobile retroreflectometer, which can collect the pavement marking retroreflectivity with color and contrast. So we collected the data, as I mentioned before. So we collected the data before painting. So with the existing condition, we only used level 1 vehicles, which can only provide centering, but there was no braking or steering assist. So there was a driver all the time behind the wheels who drove the vehicle and collected the data from the AV vehicles. But we collected before painting the roadway, while there was temporary painting put on the roadways, 4 inches temporary painting we collected during construction season. And later on, when the final paint was put on the roadway, we also collected all the data, means both the retroreflective pavement marking data as well as data from a vehicle equipped with ADAS features. So to give you a little bit overview of the data that we collected using the mobile retroreflectivity. So we drove on the rightmost lane on the selected sites. So we collected both center line and edge line data because we had 1 retroreflectometer. So we need to switch the sides of retroreflectometer, but collected both the center line and edge line pavement marking data. So approximately more than 1,200 miles of center line pavement marking data we collected, and around 1,174 miles of edge line pavement marking characteristics were collected using the LLG7 mobile retroreflectometer. So once we collected all the data, we developed a retroreflective visualization tool. Although this was not within the scope of our study, we wanted to publish the data so that DOT folks or users can access to the data, interact with the data. So what we did, we developed this tool on an ArcGIS platform so that you can actually explore the data, filter it, review it with different visualization. As you can see, there was multiple visualization templates. There was a tabular view as well as a filter option to filter the data. And we did develop two dashboards, one for center line, one for edge line, to interact with the data. Some of the examples are, as you can see, you can explore the distribution of edge line width or edge line retroreflectivity, as well as edge line retroreflectivity distribution over the milepost information. So different kind of visualization we created in the tool. So you can explore the distribution of the data collected through the LLG7. Another interesting application we were able to do is checking the data in pre and post construction. So if you know the date when the landmarking pavement was painted, so you can put the date before that and see what is the pre-construction distribution of the pavement marking characteristics like retroreflectivity or pavement marking width, and then see the post-construction. So as you can see, if I go back and forth, this is on the same roadway. We did change the date. So one is from 2022 and this one is collected in 2023. There was definitely some changes in the retroreflectivity of the pavement marking as this site was painted around December in 2022. Okay, so moving on to the AV data that were collected by consumer report. So as I mentioned, so we selected 8 vehicles from different makes and models. We are not publishing the names of those vehicles, just some designation. Vehicle make year range from 2020 to 2022 and range from sedan, SUV, truck, minivan, and it also combines front-wheel drive, all-wheel drive, and 4x4 drive. So all these 8 vehicles are from different manufacturers with different makes and models. We did not include Tesla and Super Cruise because they have their proprietary GPS location data built into these vehicles, which we didn't want to use. So we didn't include Tesla and Super Cruise in this study. So basically, when we collected the data, as I mentioned, so this manufacturer actually restricted us to access, tap into their system and see when the landmarking is detected or not. So the only way we can identify whether the landmarking is detected or not, but from the video recorded from the dashboard camera. So that the dashboard shows when the ADAS system is engaged, whether the landmarking is detected or not, and whether your vehicle is going over the landmarking so that they can give you lane departure warning. So different kind of warnings are shown on the dashboard, which shows us whether the system was able to detect landmarking or not. So we did collected recorded videos from the dashboard from each of the vehicles during trial runs, and then we later on processed using human eye to flag where the vehicle were failed to detect the landmarking. Okay, so this is already presented in the last discussion already discussed. Each vehicle system is different. So there was no way we can create a unique system or unique algorithm to process these videos. All of the vehicle has different when the landmarking is detected. Some of the vehicle shows in green, some of the vehicle shows in another different color. So there was a color difference, there's a sign marking difference, which actually make it a little bit distinct from each vehicle. So the 8 vehicles that we used, all of them has very different landmarking indication on their dashboard. So that actually increased a little bit of our processing time, but we had to process each of these vehicles separately because of these changes in indication. So the way we processed the data is the data was collected using a VBox system that can collect longitude, location information, GPS coordinates, as well as the speed and headings, acceleration, all this information. So there was a tool called VBox circuit tool. We can import those data into the circuit tool and see why the landmarking was not detected, and then go back to this exported Excel sheet and put a trigger. Okay, these are the location where landmarking was detected, and these are the location where the vehicle failed to detect landmarking. little bit data issue before we talk about, so we do need to understand. So now we have collected the pavement marking characteristics data. We have collected AV data from all these 8 selected vehicles. But before we jumped into the analysis, we do need to understand there was a little bit data issue that we experienced. So real world data is actually affected by several factors. So it's not as simple as it is. So as mentioned in the previous presentation, that 32 miles per hour is the actual threshold speed when these systems actually kicks in. So for our study, we identified 38 miles per hour. We used a threshold speed of 38 miles per hour when this ADAS system will be engaged, and we can verify whether the lane marking was detected or not. But for example, if there was a slower vehicle in front of you, you can drive at a 38 miles per hour, even though the system is engaged. So we have to throw out the data. So it can be affected by a lot of factors like this traffic factor. Another contextual factors that we experienced is sun glare or headlight glare. So when there was sun glare, the glare is on the dashboard, which affected the video, which resulted in very difficult to process. We can't understand whether the lane marking is detected or not because there was a sun glare on the dashboard. Equipment use sometimes, for example, some of the sites we selected is state highways, which are covered by trees. In some cases, the GPS actually lost connection. So if GPS actually lost connection, you can't pinpoint where the locations are. So as you can see, I showed a simple example. The longitude latitude is 0 here, and the speed is 0, even though the vehicle was running, because the GPS actually lost connection, so it couldn't record any data. So it can be affected by a series of factors. So we do need to make sure the way we are designing the study, the way we are finding the sites, it has to be in a way that these factors will less likely to affect the data collection that would be used for research study. And as I already mentioned, so the ground truth data collection is actually affected by these factors, which is video quality, GPS error, the way we name those files, variation in the dashboard indication, and the pending schedule. So I'll talk a little bit more about few of these items in this next few slides.
Hey, Shaon,
Yes.
you have about 5 more minutes. I want to make sure we have a good amount of time for Q&A for you. Just letting you know. Thank you.
Okay, so this is one of the examples. So we selected 16 sites. 6 of them actually were, although all of them are scheduled to painted in 2021 and 2022, 6 of them are still will be painted in 2023. So as you can see, it's very it is sometimes time consuming and difficult to coordinate this painting schedule with the real world data collection that also affected some of the data collection in our study. But we were able to collect data from all the sites and use the data for the sites that are already being paved and painted. Another issue that we experienced is the distribution. Because of the painting schedule issue, some of the data are collected at a single month and then later on not collected over time. So there was an inconsistent distribution of the data that we collected between the months when we started and when we ended the data collection for the ground truth data collection. So this is a visit table. I'll not go into details. So we did divide it after processing all the data we processed 5 vehicles out of 8. We did divided them into 3 phases, before, during, and after, and we saw and divided them into day and night to find out whether we do have data across vehicles or whether we do have data in before and after, so that we can do comparison. So based on these 5 vehicles of the data we processed, as you can see, vehicle 3 and 4 has the minimum amount of data, but vehicle 1 and vehicle 5 has more data. So for further analysis, we use the vehicles that has more data to compare. So this is one of the things that I think would be most interesting. So we selected one site where we found that there is data in before and after period. So we checked whether the lane marking characteristics are changed or not. So as you can see, that the retroreflectivity actually improved after painting, contrast actually also improved after painting, as well as the before period, the retroreflectometer was failed to detect the color at a lot of locations on the sites, but after painting, it was able to detect the pigment color as well as the stripe width almost across the selected site. So now let's see if now we know that the pavement marking characteristic actually improved, whether the vehicle was able to detect lane marking or not. So we plotted the vehicle detection, which is left lane marking. So the legends are whether the vehicle is detected with dot. LM means left marking was not detected. RM means right marking was not detected. LRM means that both of these marking were not detected. So based on this plot, as you can see, that the vehicle was failed to detect the lane marking in both high and low speed. So the distribution is not vehicle was always failing to detect lane marking in high speed, or the vehicle was failing to detect lane marking in lower speed. So it's actually distributed across the board. We can also see, even though the pavement was repaved and repainted, vehicles still failed to detect lane marking at some of those locations. So we didn't know what are the reasons. So we did a little bit further exploration to understand whether if we compare within the same roadway for the same vehicle, what are the conclusion? So the conclusion was also similar, that this speed doesn't have any effect on the lane marking detection. So the non-detection event is occurring in both high speed and low speed. So, and also with the same pavement marking condition, vehicle was having difficulty in identifying lane marking at different locations, which doesn't have any effect with the lane marking characteristics, because both of these run 1 and run 2 with the same pavement marking characteristics. But as you can see, in one case in June run, it was able to detect the lane marking, but in August, it failed to detect the lane marking. So when we found these issues, so we actually investigated why this is actually happening. So this is one of the most interesting findings of this study is we find out the vehicle actually failed to detect lane marking when there was a change in lane marking type. So as you can see, the lane marking is changing from white to double yellow. So vehicle failed to detect lane marking at this location. So after a certain seconds, it came back on, but vehicle failed to detect lane marking at this location. That's one of the examples. Another example we find out is if there was a wider lane, even though there was a solid lane marking, we can see that the vehicle was failed to detect lane marking at these locations if there was a wide lane. Another thing that we identified, if there was a raised curb, even though there was no lane marking, the vehicle was detecting that as a lane marking because of the contrast between the pavement and the grass on the side of the roadway. So these are there was few, we do have a little bit more in the final report. So we identified what are the special events that is actually affecting the lane marking detection or not. So these are the things we found. So if we want to summarize all of the functions, so we didn't find any relationship of the vehicles that cannot detect lane marking with the retroreflectivity. Vehicle was able to detect lane marking with retroreflectivity less than 100 millicandela. So one thing to note is all of the retroreflective reading that we collected through this study has more than 50 millicandelas. But we saw there's a significant amount of data points where the vehicle was able to detect lane marking with less than 100 millicandela retroreflectivity. We also find out that the vehicle were able to detect lane marking when there was stripe with around 3 inches. And same thing, we had a significant amount of data points which verify this information. We also found similar observation is there was no relationship also with color and contrast too, when there was vehicle was able to detect the lane marking and when they are failing. And same thing with the vehicle speed. It is occurring at the low speed as well as high speed. We identified these special scenarios when there was a change in lane marking type and color, as well as the wide lane or object on the road. So these are the situations when these are the unusual situation and vehicle were able to fail to detect lane marking at these locations. One last slide is we do have a series of recommendation or lesson learned from this study. So as I initially mentioned about the data issues, so we do need to design a study very effectively so that the other factors does not significantly impact the data, so which would be used for future research. So we do need to define this data collection procedure. We need to check the data for accuracy time to time before we conduct the entire run. And we do need to run multiple runs at the same location with varying speed and varying pavement condition so that we have multiple runs of data with different parameters to compare between after we collect all the data. Another issue we experienced is we did have 16 sites, which is a lot, and which also affected our data collection. So we do need to carefully design the studies and select site so that we can quickly collect data without any major issue, without driving for a long time if we are targeting to collect data on real world roadways. And design an appropriate data archiving procedure, because this is very important. And then later on, multiple studies can be done with using the same data set. So you need to define and appropriately archive the data for future use too. So I think that's pretty much everything I have.
That was great, Shaon. Thank you. And just like the JD Power project, I feel like we really learned a lot here. And the coalition's goal with being involved in this project was meaningful research to share with our members. And the final report's underway, as Shaon mentioned. We're going to be sharing that. And I think that baseline of data that you mentioned, Shaon, in your findings was very, very important. The requirements, maybe shifts for agencies in managing their lane markings, maybe budgets and schedules and that sort of thing. And, each dashboard is different. So any questions from the group? We have a minute for questions. And we will be providing the presentations afterwards. We are recording this as well, so it will be on our YouTube channel. And thank you, Esther. She just put the YouTube link to the JD Power video. So the contact information for all of our speakers will be in the presentation deck that you'll receive in a few weeks. Okay, we have a question here. Oh, I'm sorry, that was just the video. Any questions for Pete or for Shaon? Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope this was a great way to spend an early afternoon, and we hope you learned something. And please reach out to us at any time if you have recommendations for future webinars or virtual information exchanges or anything that we can help you with at the Coalition. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.